and welcome back to Metals and Momentum. My name is Anthony, and in this video we are going over to my Substack page, Metals and Momentum, and you can see the best investment of the year. This is an article that I wrote talking about the best investment that I made this year. Now, on a bi-weekly basis, I write an investment thought that you can kind of read through. This is part of the free tier, and then we also go over a weekly watch list as well. That is all part of the newsletter, Metals and Momentum on Substack. If you want to subscribe, you get the investment thought for free. You also get access to a watch list. If you want to jump over to the paid tier, you get a little bit more insight into the exact holdings that I'm buying and selling. I am kind of a swing trader, but also a little bit of like a long-term investor, or at least I try to be. But when the market is giving you a gift horse, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth, and you start to sell off that position. I tend to sell off a little bit earlier than the maximum upside, and I'll go over this investment that I had right now and take a look at how this actually played out. Now, I'll take you through, like right out the gate, I'll show you the stock that was my best investment of the year, and I went heavy into this stock over the past year, and I'm just starting this newsletter, so unfortunately, I was texting a bunch of friends saying that we should get into this stock, and a couple of you guys did, which is great. Now that I have the newsletter, I can actually show you what I've essentially done throughout the year, and part of the year was documented because this is a fairly new newsletter. But let's talk about this stock right here and how this actually performed over the past year. So if I show you the date, and I'm just going to get rid of this here. If I show you the date, this chart essentially goes back to April of 2025. Now, I got into this stock a little bit early. So I think it was around late December. It was somewhere around right here I started to purchase the stock. And if I actually go back to the article, you could see my overall investment performance over the year to date, really. Pretty much the year, but I also showed you my purchases of NAT. So I started accumulating NAT around December 10th. On December 10th, I started to place that order. So December 10th is somewhere right here. So about right here is where I started to accumulate this stock, because I was looking at the fundamentals at that time, and the stock looked incredibly cheap, but it also was paying a huge dividend. I think it was like 10% when I started, and then when this stock eventually dropped down to right about here, which is where my last purchase was, you can see it. We'll talk about that in a sec. This stock actually was paying closer to a 15% dividend. So one of the things that I look at is, one, how cheap is the stock, and is it paying a good dividend? Because your dividends can sometimes offset the potential loss that you're kind of calculating on your investment. So let's first talk about what is actually NAT. So I had been following this stock for multiple years, and I was reading like all the reports. This is an oil tanker stock, and the oil tanker market is actually not a very complex market to really understand. It essentially is you are taking barrels of oil and shipping them across the world. So if you're drilling for oil in, say, Mexico, you want to deliver it to Europe, that's what an oil tanker would do. It's a very simple business to kind of wrap your head around, and what makes it even more easy is that there is an oil tanker index. So I'll hop over to the tanker market index. This is what this is actually called. And you can see that these are the shipping rates by the day for whatever tanker that your company actually holds. So for example, NAT is mostly a Suez Max tanker. So these are the types of ships that they actually have. Majority of the ships that NAT actually has is this one type of ship. So you can actually see how much money they are going to generate per day. And then of course NAT is going to tell you how many days of the year that they actually have booked. So if we're looking closer to, so this I started purchasing back in 2024, which is this blue line. They were making about 30,000, just over 30, I think it was 33,000. I'm surprised I actually remember that. $33,000 per day every time their ships were actually booked. And then into 2025, it started to get even better. So when I started buying, the price that they were actually, when I really started picking up my buying, was back when they were making about $40,000, $50,000 per day. And I was saying, wow, this looks really, really good. The fundamentals of this company look very, very sound. So one thing that was actually interesting is it's people think like, oh, an oil tanker, it's going to fluctuate on the price of oil. Sort of, but not in the way that you would actually expect. So for example, when COVID hit, oil actually went negative, and this was actually extremely good for NAT. The stock went from $2.39 to near $10 per share. This was obviously an extreme kind of jump in price, and it only really stayed at $10 per share for a very short period of time. But the way that the tanker stocks actually make money is not actually based off of the price of the oil, but the price of oil can actually affect whether or not, those shipping rates go higher or lower. For example, in 2020, when the price of oil went negative, what these oil companies started to do was book these tankers, and they would actually store oil in barrels on these tankers rather than shipping them out and selling them essentially at a loss. Oil went to negative $30 a barrel. So these oil companies would pay you $30 to take the barrel of oil from you. That's pretty insane. So obviously you would want to wait that out. So how these oil companies were doing it was they would purchase or rent these ships and then store the barrels of oil on those ships. And that resulted in just essentially all of the oil tanker ships being booked. And then it results in higher tanker market index kind of rates, right? So the higher the day rate is. So that's kind of what I was looking back on and kind of seeing and trying to figure out, like, how does NAT actually make money? So back in December, I started to make purchases of NAT, and I essentially bought December 10th. I bought two purchases, one at 5,000, one at 4,000, and then in March I waited a little bit of time, see how it kind of played out there. Like, for example, we saw this like little spike here, and I was like, okay, maybe not the best time to buy here. But let's go over to January, February, March. We started to come back down a little bit. There's March 10th, 11th. Where was my next purchase here? Somewhere around the 19th. Yeah, the 19th. So again, started to accumulate somewhere around here, there. Stopped the purchases. And then my final purchase was April. But around March, something very strange started to happen. I was looking at the fundamentals of the company, and they were just getting better and better. And I was like, holy smokes, like, this is kind of crazy. We should continue to buy this stock. And the dividend remained very high. The dividend was actually very affordable. It was a payout ratio of about 80%, which is exactly where you kind of want to be when it comes to a payout ratio from any company, really. So what I started to see and notice is the largest shareholder of NAT started buying shares in fairly significant chunks. So I got an email notification from the company. You can subscribe to these email notifications from companies for free. And what I started to do is I started a purchase, and then the largest shareholder of the company would send out an email saying, this person just purchased $100,000 worth of NAT stock. And I was like, interesting. That happened multiple times. It was like $100,000 somewhere around here. And then the next purchase that I made was somewhere like, it was like March 17th or whatever it was there, somewhere around here. I would make a purchase, and then they would also send out an email notification like following my purchase. It was very strange how this kept working out exactly. So the largest shareholder of the company then purchased like another purchase, but more in terms of the dollar value. So it was like $150,000 that next purchase. And then we get to my final purchase right here. So this was on April 4th. I made a last purchase of 775 shares, and I was pretty much like out of cash at this point in time here. Like I was fully invested. So if we go to April 4th, look what happened here. On April 4th, I make that purchase into the down day. I remember catching 218. So 218 is right near the low of the day. And I remember this very specifically. I made the purchase, and an hour later, I get another trade notification saying that the largest shareholder of the company bought $250,000 worth of this stock. And what happened from there? This is what happened from there. I made that purchase. The next trading day, which was a Monday, the stock popped a pretty insane amount. And let's actually we can measure this out with a little info line here. The stock popped 7.79% the following day, which was a Monday, and we were off to the races from there. So I started to follow this trend line, and I started to notice that we started to trade in this parallel pattern. Now, let me just get rid of this here for a second so we can take a look at the channel that it started to trade in. We started to notice that it started to just trade in this channel, dipped under here, but still within a larger kind of parallel channel here, and we were in a significant uptrend. And I just said, we ride this out. I think, we started to run into resistance somewhere around here. We started to trade sideways, but still within the channel. And I said, this is when I started the newsletter somewhere around July, August or something like that. It was trading in an uptrend, and I sent out notifications to my paid subscribers saying, hey, we need to potentially buy on this breakout here. And we did. And I sent out the trade notifications. We experienced another big pop. And right around here is where I started to sell, because I was looking at, I made multiple sells throughout this time here, but I did trade this little pop here. And basically, I had a price target of 383, and the stock started to get very expensive. Like, we're talking very high PEs, historically high PEs. We went from like a PE ratio of 9 back at the very bottom of this chart here. It was like historical lows, and now we are at like historical highs, which is kind of crazy to experience that run. So I had wrote down at the very beginning what were the reasons why I was actually buying the stock. The stock was historically cheap. That was my number one reason. And then the other thing that I started to notice when I was looking at the fundamentals and like the actual balance sheet of the company, within a few months of earnings, the stock would actually generate more revenue than the current market cap. So what do I mean by the market cap? So if I wanted to buy the entire company, it would actually only cost me a few months of their revenues, which was pretty abnormal at the time. Like this is something that doesn't happen often. So that was one indicator that I was like, holy smokes, that's kind of crazy. And then I was, of course, watching these tanker market indexes, the spot rates actually rise in 2025 during Q1. And I was saying, holy smokes, like we're going to make a lot of money this year. And then the last indicator that I was looking at was the dividend. The dividend was extremely high, and the dividend was actually affordable. Like I said, that dividend was about 10%. The payout ratio was about 80 to 85%, somewhere around there. That's exactly what you want to see when it comes to a payout ratio of a dividend. So the thing that I was thinking about is, even if the stock dropped 20% in 2025, my downside risk was like a 10% loss. And if you expand your time horizon over, say, 2 to 5 years, how much lower could NAT go? It could have gone a little bit lower, but at some point in time, you're going to see other shareholders, for example, the major shareholder, start to invest large amounts of money into NAT. So the dividend almost offset the downside risk almost to zero if you extend your time horizon out a little bit, right? Like that's what I was kind of looking at. So I started to realize, like, this is kind of interesting. It's almost like a stock that it was a little bit hard to lose money at the time because of that massive dividend. It was pretty wild. So that's the kind of things that I was looking at. So these are the kind of things that I look at when I'm trying to purchase like a position in a company for the longer term. But what I was expecting is, like, if I was expecting to hold the stock for over, say, 5 years and get paid 15%, essentially we received 5 years of dividends within one single year thanks to the price appreciation. On top of that, I did collect large dividends throughout the year, and I just started to sell as the stock started to get a little bit more expensive because I was going back to the reasons to buy this stock. And the stock it started to get very expensive. It was no longer historically cheap. The earnings from the company, what happened with the earnings? Yeah, like they did well. They started to do really well, but the stock had risen like 70% over the course of the year here. It was no longer cheap. And then the announcement came to cut their dividend even lower. And I said to myself, well, that's one of the reasons why, I bought the stock to begin with, because I wanted to collect the dividend, and the dividend was actually protecting some of my downside risk. Maybe it's time to sell. And that's exactly what I did. So I don't know, NAT could go a lot higher from here. But when my reasons to buy became no longer really valid, I said to myself, you know what? I think it might be time to sell. And that's what I did this year. So if we look at my overall portfolio year to date, I'm up 41%. NAT was a very large holding in my portfolio. I sold out of the stock completely, and we made a really, really good gain. And on the year, we're going to be up 40%. But I thought this was just an interesting kind of case study as to, why you should buy and why you should sell, and kind of protecting your downside risks. So if you're interested in this type of analysis, then head over to Substack. The link's in the description down below. You can subscribe to the free tier of my Substack, but you could also subscribe to the paid tier and get a little bit more, a deeper dive into the holdings that I actually hold right now. It's $9 a month if you want to do that. But I just thought this was super interesting. That was definitely the best investment of the year. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Anthony. This is Metals and Momentum. I'll see you in the next one.